Hi everybody, I'm Dr. Randy Bach. I'm here with the Newton Television, Newton TV's Taxpayer Talk on behalf of the Newton Taxpayers Association. Today's March 18th, 2024, and I'm honored to have with me a guest, Anping Shen. I don't know if he goes by doctor. I think he's got an educational doctorate degree, originally from China, and he has been an educator in the United States and served in, I believe, the state educational bureaucracy for, he'll tell us probably, for secondary and elementary education, if I'm not mistaken. And we are here to talk about the Newton teacher strike, RIP. May we never get another one. It was in January, 11 days worth of it, and it was a lot of upheaval. And Mr. Anping Shen is a school committee member, and here we go. Anping, so thank you so much for coming with us. Maybe tell us a little bit as preface of your own story, and I'd like to, maybe segue into, if you don't mind, a question about kind of the differential in outcomes between, say, some of the Asian and in particular Chinese students in our school system and the average. How is it that certain students, groups of students, do better, and what is it that maybe some of the other students are missing in education, and how can we kind of integrate that in the educational system? So tell us first a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, I came here from China. My hometown is Suzhou, very close to Shanghai, 36 years ago, 1988. And I got scholarship from Boston University, school education, and very grateful to get scholarship. I came here, and a year later, my wife and my 3-year-old son joined me. So I got my master and doctorate degree in education from school education at that time, now called the Wheelock College of Education Development, I believe that's the name. But anyway, very grateful and got a chance to move to Newton and to help the so-called group home. Basically a group of adults with disabilities live in their house, and I was kind of living person to help them. So since then, I have never moved away.
That's wonderful.
And for over 35 years living in Newton, so I feel Newton is my home.
So how did you get interested in being on the school committee, and maybe tell us a little bit about how your kids did and Chinese kids kind of writ large, to pertinent to my previous question?
Yes, you asked this question. As a matter of fact, as educator myself, I was trained as a teacher in China, so this question, like some other questions, always in my mind and in my studies. Basically, I think Chinese culture shares quite some traits like some other cultures. Focus on family. Education is really, really a critical aspect of Chinese Chinese culture. And sometimes I use an analogy which some people don't like. I said, educating to many Chinese people, almost like a religion here. And for example, I was a principal of Chinese language school, operates at Day Middle School, and Sunday afternoon, and I told my kids, you have to go to Chinese school. Don't ask why, you just go there. And I joke that somewhat like, kids go to this Sunday church schools, and I don't know, some people might be offended, but anyway, education is really critical. And our Confucius, over 2,000 years ago, he was the so-called teacher of all teachers in China. And so in that sense, we always feel you have to work hard, and you go to school, you got a good education, and even though we have to debate a little bit what's the content of education. So that's the debate in China right now, how to educate kids. But nonetheless, we focus on family education. I think these are two critical values. Yeah. And Chinese culture has.
I agree with that. I think there's so much that, people do thousands of studies, obviously. But one of the studies that resonated with me was they tried to correlate achievement in schools with various qualities of, families and whatnot. And they found the highest correlate for language skills and I think math skills as well. And it was just a simple question. It was like, do you have Sunday dinner as a family? And this is not a school question. It's like, it's not did you study algebra, did you study calculus, whatever. What are your school, and what pencil do you use? None of that stuff. How many computers? It was, do you have Sunday family dinners together? And that, saying yes to that question, presuming you're telling the truth, had the highest correlate with school performance. And I think obviously it's indicative of cohesion in the family and that you're able to get it all together to have a family dinner. And what happens is during those times that people talk, there's question and answer, and a lot of what happens in the schools, I think a lot of the correlation of how well cities do academically, it's not just the teachers. I mean, we all love our teachers, I get it, and we would be nowhere without the schools, I get it. But the highest correlation is not the teachers or the school system or the physical plant, it's the actual cohesiveness of your family. And so I think Newton schools are really good schools because the Newton families historically have been cohesive families who impart these same values you're talking about. I grew up in New York City, and my heritage is Jewish, and there's kind of an immigrant flow 100 years prior in the early 1900s and whatnot. And it was basically you're here, we left that other place, we didn't have opportunities there, we came here for opportunities, but they're not opportunities if you are not ready for them.
Yeah, let me just stop you here. There's some difference here, I have to emphasize. In China, you believe education is important, but also at that time, when I grew up, and there are a lot of poor families, and parents have to work hard, but they have this ultimate belief in education. You go to schools, you get straight A. And don't ask why you have to get straight A, but that's critical. And so in that case, parents, like a Tiger Mom is a perfect example. She would not reason with kids why it's important. You just have to do the best of the best, which is a little cruel. And that a lot of Chinese intellectuals are reflecting now. But fundamentally speaking, I think that's important because you never question the value of good education.
No, and as far as doing the best, it's good to have a high bar. I think a lot of times we, with kind of the more caring feeling ethos of modern American parenthood, we bend over backwards for the things they can't do. And I think kids actually, I coached soccer for a decade, from when kid was 5 to 15, whatever, and a bunch of teams. And my teams, sometimes I had a good, depending on how well my kid had done. I sometimes had some lower level teams, sometimes I had top level teams, and independent. Even when I had kids who were not as good, supposedly, I never imparted that to them. I never said, oh, you're on level 5. You're never going to be as good as these level 2 kids, whatever. It was like we had to show that they had picked us wrong. And we had to show that we could be better than that, So it was competition. The kids really thrive on that.
I'm sorry. There's a balance here, too. And, I mentioned that I came here and spent 5-6 years in school education. So in that sense, I realized the Chinese way or the East Asian way, sometimes extreme. Again, the Tiger Mom could be a good example. And if you read her book already and you knew that she was extreme, and the reason she wrote that book because she realized, she was very harsh on kids, and so she kind of doing this as kind of, self-criticism, and to show her kids that she learned something. So, but overall, I would say there's a lot of good qualities of Chinese educational principles and system, but China is also learning something new, how to be creative.
That's a good
point. How to be independent.
Yeah.
You see?
No, there's a nice mix. My younger son took Chinese here in middle school and then high school for a little bit, and no offense, it drove him crazy. He was good at it. He was a very good artist, so he could draw the characters. And a lot of the other parents, when we'd have school day, they'd be like, they look at me, you're not Chinese. How come the characters are so good, right? So he had a proclivity for this, and he could do the language. He did the accents. but he did not like the method of learning was rote. It was she'd say something, they had to say something. It was none of the kind of creative aspect in the classroom. I guess, for learning Chinese, whatever. But I think there was a cultural difference, and he had a hard time with it. He had to drop learning the Chinese language because of that difference.
Oh, well, I have to say, I've been very lucky to have my son. He had ADHD, and he was hyperactive. Sometimes I joke with him when he was in elementary school. I said, "You look more American than American kid. He's just running around." I could not control him, but he challenged my, parenting and my thoughts. And he was not straight A student, and but he did well. He loved learning. I credit to the American teaching methods because teacher let him to be a little bit free and let him question, and he maintained his learning passion. So he was gymnast, and eventually, he was B plus A minus students, but he loved learning. He did well. He made to Stanford. I was very proud. He was gymnast. So he spent over 20 hours in high school to train in the club.
Nice.
And then still got good grades. And the most proud of things, he did well in SAT. Not in the school test.
No,
but
that's interesting.
He got the perfect score in verbal test. Blew my mind away. He even did not spend time to go to the Kaplan school to do the, preparation.
Wow.
And the other, kids all just could not believe you are not even a straight A student. How could you do so well in SAT?
That's a fun
But
thing.
anyway, so I created to the Newton school system. I really.
Well, you should credit yourself a little bit too.
Oh,
Yeah.
thanks. I think so.
So we're going to segue into the actual
Yeah.
Newton school system. So those are great stories, and we'll have to have you back again and talk more about the cultural
I
aspect.
will be happy to be back.
But I want to talk about the strike. It was an illegal strike. How much, they always say in the TV shows, what did you know and when did you know it? How much did we know about this? What was the anticipation? What were the negotiations prior? And then what did we get? You see presents under the tree at Christmas. You want to know what's in those. What are in those boxes? What do we have yet to open as Newton taxpayers, anticipating this recent deal? I read Matt Hill's Seinfeld op-ed in the Globe, and I recommend people read it as well. It was all about, basically it's a show about nothing, and ultimately there was a lot of movement, a lot of talk and action, and they got basically the same deal they would have gotten. And there were some good players and bad players. I'm curious. I'd like to hear a little bit of your perspective, the narrative. What happened?
Yeah.
Who do you think did well? Should it have happened? If you had any animus, if you had kids in the school, at whom would you be angry, if any?
Okay. Now I know you would ask this tough question, and let me be honest with you. Probably you will be surprised. I was the board member of union at my workplace. Now, this is the first time I publicly mentioned that. And I know Matt Hill very well, and I ask his advice often. And well, you can call teacher illegal, but I think union has a reason to be there. Since I was a board member of our Department of Elementary and Secondary Education union, so I understand the value. And to be honest, when I was in my workplace, I had some challenge with my supervisor. Union helped. So, but this time I was on school committee, of course, the school committee member. So I have different perspective and different responsibilities. I have to say that. And when we learned there could be, potentially speaking, strike, I'm getting very nervous. I'm losing my sleep. I told my colleagues, I said, I'm very nervous. I know if there's strike, folks will do everything possible to win the strike. I mean, I know that. And so it's tough. But, during this kind of moment, when teacher asking for pay rise, I think it's morally, I think it's correct.
I'm going to separate that out. I'm going to tease that out. I'm not, it would be another day, another show. about unions. Charter schools don't have unions. Cities apparently do. I'm not going to get into the first principles, why that is, and whether, and fact that Newton can't have charter schools by the state law and all that kind of. So I don't think it's a free and open marketplace, and I think we're kind of stuck with unions, for better, for worse, and you could say we're blessed with them, stuck with them. However, so the unions are there, I get it. But I'm not talking about the unions per se, I'm talking about the whether state employees or city employees can strike, and apparently it is illegal. Now, I'm not an expert on the law surrounding this, but the word is there, illegal strike. And so that means it's against the law. There were fines for it, and the Massachusetts Division of Labor Relations, and then the kind of their appeal level, the Committee for Election, I can't remember, the CERB it's called, reviewing it, there were fines assessed. I don't think there were as many fines and to the same amount as they should have been. My understanding is that the fines were increasing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They were increasing in amount, like $50,000 more per day each day. So if you know calculus, it's kind of like the first derivative. But then the judge brought it back down to Monday level the next week. So it's like, really, I think there was kind of not justice per se. I think it was a finger on the scale, and I think it was towards the unions from the government perspective. Liz Warren, Ed Markey, and Ayanna Press, who's not in our district, all came down on the side of the union, when in fact the prime word there in front of strike was illegal. And so, I understand the concept of demonstrating and having protests and all that kind of stuff, but the kind of the Martin Luther King concept of peaceful protest implies it's peaceful, that there's nobody on the receiving end. Mm-hmm. I think in this case there were.
Well, let me share some of my view, which is still very hard, even by now. And we could call it illegal, which I guess, technically speaking, yes. But also, I understand you're asking for the pay raise, which is very morally correct thing to ask. Anyone has a right to ask whether this action is disruptive to our school system, which I agree, it's very disruptive and it's very painful. And for 11 days, that was very tough. And I went to the parents, meeting, and they asked me, and I told them, it's very hard. And but we have to stop that. And I'm glad, by the way, that Friday, the last day of strike, school committee members were called to the Ed Center saying, okay, we have deal. And they're happy. And I saw a union president, Mike Zillers. I shook hands with him. I hugged him. I took selfie. I realized we have to start the heal process. So at that time, I said, to myself, let's get together. And it's painful. It's difficult. And but again, I trust the committee. We will work together, and finally, reasonable voice come out, and some parents started some of their actions, and I think that certainly helped to.
When you say parents started actions, like what actions are we talking about? I'm aware that there's going to be a potential lawsuit. I'm not sure how many thousands of parents there are, but for 11 days they had to figure out some other kind of daycare or stop work or whatever. This is on the heels of COVID. And I just put it, as a slight, side note, the Newton schools, if this were business, if this were Apple or Dell or, fill in your company, Microsoft, and usership went down 14% in a year or so, those would be failing companies. Newton schools lost 14% of their enrollment in the last couple of years on the heels of COVID and on the heels of, I think, parents seeing what some of the stuff that was going on in the schools along the CRT lines. They deny it, but they're CRT-like aspects in the schools. That's another day, another topic. Yeah. But that number has not gone back up. And anyway, so to the point of these teachers, of the parents, is that the legal action you're talking about, that they're kind of bringing the school system to task for having the missed days?
It certainly is. This is a tough part, and I was not directly involved in terms of how to make up those days, and no one is happy. And Students are not happy, parents are not happy because you had to use the vacation time and to make up. But again, I think when you're saying the student enrollment dropped, a lot of factors. You know, you certainly, it's challenging. COVID-19 certainly had a tremendously negative impact on some families, and they wanted to have school open. But also I understand some minority families, and they felt comfortable. I know quite a few Asian families, they felt comfortable to have kids at home because they're concerned about all this. So that's a challenge. Probably you said another day for another discussion. And you know, we're still going to see the enrollment decreasing in the following years, probably 5-10 years. And that's the unfortunate part. But also I think there are a lot of misinformation in the community when they say, well, you know, city had enough money, so we failed the city operation budget, which is very unfortunate. And you know, school department did not have enough money to pay for the teachers' salary increase. And
you're talking because of the failure of the override? Is that what you're saying?
Certainly a big factor.
Okay, so let's speak to that slightly, because that is kind of one of our things here in Newton Taxpayers Association. So I don't think it's a secret we were against the overrides, plural, and the main override did not pass, did not succeed. Again, see above, 14% diminishment in enrollment. We did not see 14% fewer school buildings. We did not see 14% fewer teachers. And so, you know, and my understanding is, in fact, the number of teachers went up very slightly, but went up in the face of diminishing enrollment. You know, before Elon Musk took over Twitter, you know, they had a large staff. He took over Twitter, I think 45% of the staff disappeared within, you know, when we either left or were fired within like a couple months. Twitter's still there. They're probably performing better and they're financially better. You know, sometimes there's bloat. Nobody wants to be considered that himself, but in a system where you've lost 14% of students, you could easily do the math and say, maybe we should have 14% or maybe 10% fewer this or that.
I have to challenge you. 14%, where did you get that percentage? I think probably 5%, no more than 10%, decrease in past 5 years, possibly. Apologize, I don't have the exact number, but not 14. But again, I think this 14, this percentage is irrelevant in this discussion. I have to push a little bit back. So again, there's a lot of factors impacting school enrollment in Newton. And don't forget, there's a strong voice against development, which is very unfortunate. I remember when I was supporting the Northland project, and I got some people did not like my appearance as I think the supporting campaign used my image and to get the votes for support the development. And we need more development for revenue, but also for student enrollment. Unfortunately, the Newton's property is too expensive. They even build more units, and possibly those young families with kids will not be able to move in. That's the other part. So a lot of factors. So I hope you will not only put those factors to argue for.
Well, I can't argue a conceptual future. I'm arguing the current. And the numbers, from what I understand, are fairly solid. We can talk about that later, and I can send you links. But 14%, there are 14% fewer students than there were like 3 or 4 years ago. And Newton's population did not change, and the kids didn't disappear. They didn't, go whatever. People have out of their own pocket, mind you, they're basically, Newton schools are not free, but if you're already paying tax, you already live here, or you're paying taxes through your rent or whatever, essentially there's no additional cost. And so parents are adding an extra $50,000 or so per child to on top of what they already spent for taxes and everything else in life, to send their kids not to Newton schools. That's different from even just like, oh, I have an Apple product, I'm going to go to a Microsoft product. That's almost neutral, same price. But in this case, I'm not going from my iPhone to my Samsung. I'm going from my Apple. I dislike it so much, I'm going to my Samsung and paying $50,000. That's an indictment either Samsung's so great or Apple's so bad. I'm not trying to use those products. I'm just saying in this case, Newton schools are ostensibly free if you live there, you have a place, and you're going to spend that extra money for some reason, and a lot of people did. I think it was a twofold because of the school closure, the duration of the closure, and part of it's some of the curriculum stuff. Anyway, I'm going to give you a chance for last words.
And that's the part I thought very hard. During the override campaign, I worked very hard, attended a lot of meetings and tried to give my support. And basically, my house is a little bit below the average housing, the property value. And every year you might pay $500–600. I don't know exact number now, but I'm willing to pay that. You go to a restaurant, my wife and I, you could easily spend $100 or $150. So basically, few night dinner, and now you save that money, and you see all disruption.
Okay, so I'm gonna.
So you see, the city was really lack of those.
Well, I don't think the override brought on the strike, frankly. And I think I would bring it back to your kid. Your kid's a wonderful man, it sounds like. And I'm just going to say this one thing, because we only got a minute or two left, is that the kids understand when you give them an allowance and how much they have to spend. And they can't really go above it, and so forth. I think that in household expenditures, in our own homes, we have a certain amount we can spend. We hit that ceiling, that's that.
Let me finish my thoughts. And now my wife and I still stay in the same house, and my kids gone. I know some young families want to move in, but if it's close to $1 million house, who can pay that? So I blame myself a little bit. We got older, and we don't want to move out of Newton. But again, I appreciate that I'm willing to support the override. I know our mayor is talking about override again, and I think that's very critical. It's good for our community. It's good for our system. I hope, by the way, your organization will support the override next time.
Well, my general feeling is that you tell people how much money they have and they should live within it. The percentage of the Newton budget that goes to the schools has increased. This is a percentage of how much money we spend. It's, I think in the 60s, like 63% of the total budget goes to schools. We're not underspending on schools, and Newton teachers do not leave the system. Even before the strike, we have the highest retention of teachers amongst any school system, and that's because they're not getting paid too little. They're getting paid just enough or too much. Because they're not leaving. If people vote with their feet. You left China for a reason. People could leave the Newton school system for a reason. So I'm going to give you 1 second for 10-second final thoughts.
But again, let's say the wonderful Newton school system, they're called the premier school system, and I appreciate that, and let's support that. And the teacher like to stay here. That's because wonderful of the school system. And do not say that's because they got a good pay. I agree. And we need more money, and we have to use money responsibly. Okay. And that's good philosophy. I support that.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Anping, for being on our show. We've got a lot more to talk about, I think, so I'm happy to have you come back on again. I appreciate your being here. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Please share this and tell your friends, and keep up with us. We're on Facebook at the Newton Taxpayers Association, easy to spell if you've been to our schools.